magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, oh, oh. There's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to Sassafras Cast. This is episode 58 of Sassafras Cast, and we will be talking today about endings and beginnings. My name is Rorie Kelly, and I am a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we will begin the witchy weather report, but first, a shout out to my patrons. If you didn't know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them answered in real time. They also get access to my Discord server where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout out in each episode. Here we go. Thank you, Amanda Curry, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Periwinkle Twilight, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, Brittany Campbell, Jen McPhail, and Ondine PM. I am so grateful you are in my world. And of course, I just got a recording error in Pro Tools. This is real time, y'all. Hopefully, we are recording again. Mercury is in the microwave, and that is part one of the witchy weather report, is that Mercury is in the microwave, and boy, is it. Like, I had the witchy weather report, the full social media broadcast that I do, kind of a spin-off of the podcast. I had that happen just a few hours ago, live, and literally the instant before I tried to go live, Facebook or Meta informed me that I could no longer go live as Sassafras Tarot on Instagram because they changed the requirements for going live, and it was like 10:59 a.m. And I'm like, great. I've been promoting this for, the whole week. Great. Love it. And so I had to switch around and just go live in 3 places instead of 4 and make a quick post to announce that. And Mercury's in the microwave. Mercury in retrograde makes things annoying for us. And my practice that I challenge myself to do when Mercury is making things annoying for me is ask myself, where's the lesson? And, I think in life, I don't necessarily know that I objectively, clinically believe that everything happens for a reason, but I do believe that my life gets better when I ask myself, what lesson can I find, right? I think it's a functional and useful way to approach life, to ask myself, what lesson can I find? And so with Mercury in the microwave, what lesson can I find? What lesson can I find in Instagram changing the requirements suddenly so I can't go live because I don't have enough followers? Well, maybe I find the lesson that I have been wanting to increase my audience and have kind of been half-assed, not quite doing that, not quite putting my money where my mouth is in terms of just showing up for that for a while now. And maybe the lesson is, you know what? You just got a kick in the butt to do the thing that you said you wanted to do. I don't know. I think when we look for a lesson, we can find one, and we can choose to make it one that's actionable, and that I think is a useful tool during Mercury retrograde. This particular Mercury retrograde, and this, I've morphed into the witchy weather report already just to tell you about what's going on and the energy of the moment. This is relevant if you're watching live or close to live. I am recording this on July 26th for my patrons. And the live broadcast, and you'll be probably hearing it if you just listen to the podcast release, probably in the next couple days before the end of July. This particular Mercury retrograde is also happening to coincide pretty closely with a new moon in Leo that we just had. And so I'm taking the time to consider, how do I need to reconsider and revise how I see myself and how I let myself be seen? Because that is what Leo is all about, how we see ourselves and how we let ourselves be seen. How do I want to be seen? How do I not want to be seen, right? And I'm allowing myself to consider kind of the lessons of Mercury retrograde through that lens. Maybe it's helpful for you too. If so, take it. I'm also going to pull a card for everybody, and then we're going to get into this episode where I talk about endings and beginnings. I'm in the throes of both endings and beginnings as I navigate a divorce and also a move. I've moved into a new place, and so there's a lot that's new and there's a lot that's old, and that's kind of, I'll get into that in a deeper way once we look at our card for the moment. I pull these cards with an intention that wherever and whenever it finds you, it have something of meaning to offer you. So whether you do listen live or you do listen close to live right when the broadcast drops, or whether you, are happening upon this years later, in which case, hello, how's the future? And never mind, I don't know if I want to know. In either case, the intention is that wherever, whenever it finds you, it be meaningful. So here's the card. The card is the Spirit of Cups. I'm reading with the Mystical Dream Tarot by Janet Piedletto, and some of the card meanings are a little different from the traditional ones because this was created by someone who does have a knowledge of the tarot, but who also deliberately channeled the imagery through their dreams in order to create these cards, which you know if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time that I'm obsessed with dreams and lucid dreaming and dream work, and also obsessed with tarot. And so this is like, I saw this on a shelf and I was like, it's mine, it must be mine. So the Spirit of Cups, first of all, we have this butterfly representing transformation, and we also have this cocoon energy here where we can see, and if you're listening to this, know that there is a video version where you can physically see me holding up this card to the camera. There's this, we're talking about transformation. We're talking about change. And cups represent the element of water. Water is also called the universal solvent because enough time with water and it will break down anything. We see mountains being broken down and ground into sand by the continued lapping of the waves, right? Water is about transformation. Water aids in transformation. And so the Spirit of Cups is about this spirit of transformation and allowing ourselves to understand that we are ever changing and that also we get to hold on to our true self throughout those changes, right? We see this person being represented both as a person in fetal position, unborn, and also a butterfly, their full potential as well as where they are at now. If you're in the goo phase of your life, know that you're exactly where you should be because ongoing transformation is actually a part of our identity as humans in this plane of existence, right? Nothing stays the same. That's just a constant. Ironically, it's a constant that nothing stays the same. Some things degrade over time, some things grow over time. In many cases, just chaos happens and things change, right? Different forces act on different things and things change, right? Nothing stays the same, including us. We change deliberately through our own choices, and we also change not deliberately through whatever the universe throws at us, right? We're shaped by our lives and we're shaped by how we choose to show up for our lives. And embracing the fact that change is a constant will make your life easier. And embracing the fact that yes, you will have feelings, that will be an emotional journey, will also make your life easier. We can be kind to ourselves through the constancy of change. But trying to hold on to an unchanging state is unlikely. And there may be things that you wish to last a lifetime, right? Relationships, intentions, callings, right? Like something that is constant about me is I have a calling around music. That's not going to go away. I discovered that when I was quite young, and I know for a fact that it's not something I even could walk away from if I wanted to. It's in my blood. It's in my bones, whether or not I'm actively pursuing it, but I don't know how to stop pursuing it, right? However, how I exist in relationship to that calling and how I grow with that calling evolves, right? It changes and evolves. I'm a different musician than I was when I first discovered music. I'm a different musician than I was when I was 10 years old and took piano lessons and quit for a little while. And I was pretty good at learning by ear and pretty half-assed at practicing. I'm a different musician than I was a day ago, you know, because I'm always growing and evolving. Things always change. And in relationships, we may choose to make a commitment to one or more people for life. And I am not just speaking, of course, of relationships that are romantic in nature. I'm speaking of family, having a kid, making someone your chosen family, deciding that you're committed and connected to them with a family bond more than just a bond of friendship, whether or not, you know, you have a bloodline that's in common. And whether we do this in a romantic way or in a non-romantic way, we do make commitments to people in our lives that we hope will last a lifetime. And we learn along the way that the way to make those commitments last is not by being unchanging, but by being adaptable, by being willing to grow, and by being willing to adapt to the growth of the other person, by being willing to embrace ourselves and the other person, past, present, future versions of them, rather than feeling like things need to stay the same for them to keep working, because everything changes. Everything changes. What would it feel like to embrace the fact that everything is changing, and also that's how it's always been? What does that feel like for you right now? That is the question the Spirit of Cups asks for you. It also reminds you that, like, you have this because everything has been changing, including you, for your whole life. You already know how to do this. Hydration checkpoint to everybody. I do these live and on purpose, and I've had people tell me, I love when you do a hydration checkpoint on the podcast because it reminds me to stay hydrated. That's the point, man. I do it for me because my voice wants some water when I'm doing all this talking when I'm recording. Cheers. Okay. The main topic of our episode today is endings and beginnings. And I made some notes about what I wanted to talk about, but mostly I'm shooting from the hip because I've been living in this space of endings and beginnings in a few ways. As a human being, I've been living in a space of endings and beginnings for a few years now as I navigate a divorce. I've also just made a move to a new place. And so in many ways, my life is changing. In many ways, it isn't. I have some lifelong commitments that remain the same. And that's the nature of change, is that while there are things that are changing, there are other things that do remain constant, right? We don't have to, it's rare actually, that everything dramatically changes overnight in our lives. It does happen. And those cards, those types of changes are represented by, I'll be referring to tarot cards throughout this as kind of a helpful starting place to help us understand some of these concepts. Those types of changes are represented by cards like the Tower and the Wheel of Fortune, where big stuff happens out of the blue and changes everything. Even the stuff that stays the same gets maybe recontextualized, right? We look at it differently. 2020 was a tower moment where the world as we knew it changed dramatically overnight. Now, other things didn't necessarily change. We had the same friendships and relationships we had, right? Many, but not all of us had the same jobs that we had. Although for some people, you know, that became a real question mark as well, or the way that it needed to happen changed, right? The way we needed to engage with our relationships changed as we went into social isolation. We also have big overnight changes that can be in the form of a boon. You know, you could win the lottery. Suddenly your life and your life trajectory and a lot of the choices that you would have made a day ago are no longer applicable, right? That's the Tower and its sister card, the Wheel of Fortune. When big change happens from outside of ourselves, and what it does is change a few concrete things in our life, right? In the example where we win the lottery, suddenly we don't have to worry about money. What choices would you make differently if you didn't have to worry about money, right? And so one concrete thing is changed, and all of these other things can be changed because now they have been recontextualized, right? Now you may choose whether you wish to work or how you wish to work or how much you wish to work. Whereas before you won the lottery, in this scenario, you won some, ungodly amount of money. It was not a choice. You needed to work to support yourself, right? And you can choose what you do with that kind of new power that you have of having, of money, because money does give you power in this world, right? You get new choices when we have these big dramatic changes. Similar with endings, you get new choices, and you get choices taken away when you have Tower moments. We couldn't choose to not have COVID-19 and not have lockdown for most of us. We couldn't choose to not do that. And there were people who tried to anyway, and I didn't feel it was worth the consequences. Other people had different opinions about that, but it was a very dark time. It was a time when choices that felt very simple and normal could have very catastrophic consequences, just seeing or hugging a friend, right? Especially if someone in that equation was immunocompromised or elderly or a child. And suddenly the way that we had always done the things needed to change. The relationships were still there, but the way we kept in touch needed to change. The work was perhaps still there, but the way we did it needed to change. And perhaps it was not a format that could, continue through, right? Like for me, I'm a musician. Like, okay, I was not going to be able to get music out to people by playing in places like bars and clubs, because that was not functional for several years. And so one thing changed and it recontextualized everything. And those are the big, big changes, the changes that come from outside ourselves that we don't have control over, and they affect our choices. They take away some choices, they give us new choices, and we have to learn who we are in that new circumstance. And that really is the heart of rolling with change, is learning, who am I? Who am I in this circumstance? People talk about money changing people. And the truth is, when you have a windfall, such as winning the lottery, I don't know why that's an example I use all the time. I think because people can conceive of it as being a very dramatic change. When you have a windfall financially, it's not that it changes you, it's that it's a new context that perhaps you have never been in, and you have to go through a period of learning who you are in that context. And probably there are people who make mindless choices, overwhelmed by that change, for good or ill, you know what I mean? Who find themselves perhaps giving away all the money that they just won because they're like, oh, finally I can help my friends. But they do it so quickly and without review that they realize they didn't leave enough for themselves to continue to live on, and they're back where they were, or better or worse, right? Or perhaps mindlessly in the other direction. I'm finally going to get the life I deserve. I'm finally going to whatever, do this, and this. I'm finally going to travel. I'm finally going to whatever. And perhaps ignore other areas of their lives that were previously very important to them because they're so enthralled by this new possibility. And the secret third option, right, is being mindful. The secret third option is going, wow, I have a new context in my life. Who am I in this new context? That might bring you some shadow work, even in the cases of, especially actually in the case of something good like winning money. Who am I in this context? If you woke up tomorrow and you were a billionaire, especially if you question whether billionaires should exist, right? But if you woke up and it happened to you, wow, who would you be in that context? Would you have to learn how to live with, okay, I am something that I don't think maybe should exist. Should I make some choices so that I'm not a billionaire anymore? How far do I go with that, right? Do I decide to give much away to charity, but do I keep some for me and my family? What do I do? Do I decide to use this for good, to change the world? Do I ask myself, right? Suddenly you have a whole lot of questions that you never had the luxury of considering before. And with those questions comes some responsibility. Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be in my integrity? Now, when we have changes that are dramatic and external, that are more tower moments than Wheel of Fortune, when someone dies, when someone gets sick, when a gigantic plane falls on our house, we similarly have the option of panicking and doing whatever the hell comes up, or have the option of being mindful. And certainly when crises happen, some of those decisions have to be made on the spot. That's just life, right? Sometimes you just have to adapt right then, and you just have to, well, I'm about to find out who I am in this situation, because here it is. Hang on, because my Pro Tools keeps stopping recording, and I have to keep restarting it, and Mercury's in the microwave, so I apologize that this live recording, the YouTube version, is going to have some extra parts where I have to restart my recording. So each type of change, whether positive or negative, that comes from externally, we have to navigate from a sense of, who am I in this change? Who do I want to be? Who am I when a plane falls out of my house? Who am I in crisis? Who am I when I win the lottery? Who am I in, amazing, stupid luck? Who am I in this change? And that's what we're learning. That's what we're learning when dramatic change befalls us. And in a much smaller way, Mercury retrograde, which we're in right now, if you're listening kind of close to the time of broadcast, in a much smaller way, Mercury retrograde asks us to grapple with these questions. Who am I in this change? Who am I in this dramatic moment when I thought I was about to, record a podcast and Pro Tools stops working every few minutes, when I thought I was about to go live and I find out in fact that I just simply can't anymore go live on Instagram? Who am I when I intend to get to an important appointment, instead I get lost or stuck in traffic due to an accident for 3 hours? And am I the person who views that as a personal inconvenience, or am I the person who feels awed by the gratitude that me and my loved ones are not in that accident and wonders if I can help? You know what I mean? Like, who am I? Who am I in these different circumstances? It's not about having a right or wrong answer, but that's what change does. It makes us address some of these questions. Let's talk about endings and beginnings. I read for people about endings and beginnings, and I find that this summer 2025, is one where a lot of things are happening. I've been seeing endings for a little while since the springtime, and I've started to see beginnings since the summertime. In particular, I've seen a lot of people moving and a lot of people buying houses, which haven't seen in a while. I know that it's summer is the time that real estate is kind of hot, but the real estate market's been kind of, insane. So it's been nice to be reading for people and seeing people are buying homes, people are making these big life changes, feeling that they can access to make them again. And I know it's been a long time coming for many people. And I know that with beginnings come endings, and with endings come beginnings. And I want to talk about that because I think we talk in a way, especially as readers, I see people talking about different tarot cards and endings and beginnings in a way that is a bit oversimplified, and I would like to unpack it. We talk about change, we talk about endings and beginnings as if they're these all-encompassing things, like turning the page of a book and now you're in a brand new chapter, or even better, ending one book in a trilogy and starting the next one, right? Where by the time we start the next one, usually some plot has happened without us and we have to kind of, as a reader, catch up, right? Like big overnight change. And then there's the phrase in the entertainment industry, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. And I think that phrase is a much more accurate representation of changes, even dramatic ones. What really is happening is that all of the things that have gone into making this change possible, whether good or bad, have come to a head, right? Big dramatic change. Like COVID-19 kind of escalating into a pandemic. There were many things that went into making that possible, making that perfect storm possible. And if you're like my mother and really enjoy medical thrillers, and especially ones that are like based in science, like, you know that like the possibility of pandemics alongside things like globalization and the technology and the ability we have to travel so freely, as well as climate change, has increased and will continue to increase. And so pandemics and epidemics we're going to be seeing them more, both because we will be more aware of them around the world and because they can more easily escalate because of our more global society. And with COVID-19, it really there was a perfect storm. So there's an element of chance. There's an element of like the butterfly effect, but it is the butterfly effect happening in that perfect storm so that it does create this global effect, right? Change happens. It takes 10 years to make an overnight success. It took years of all these things being in place for that one thing to happen and catch, right? Like either you strike a match and it catches and then it burns and then you have the transformative, element of fire, or you strike a match and it doesn't catch and nothing changes, right? circumstances, in other words, have to be in place for big change to take place, whether good or bad. I gave you the example of COVID, but similarly, circumstances have to exist for big change to take place in your life, right? It takes 10 years to make an overnight success. What that means in the music industry is that people have this false understanding of like, either you are like a bum living in your parents' basement or you're like Rihanna. And there's no in between. And of course, most people in the music industry live in the in between, right? I live in the in between, right? And something that appears to be an overnight success. Wow, I heard this single and I've never heard of this artist before. Well, they have been working hard at their career for probably 10 years to make that happen. Them and other people on their team, and like things and circumstances had to be in place for it to get to the point where you heard that single. And as an example, for a lot of Americans, a lot of people think You Ought to Know was Alanis Morissette's first single. It wasn't. It was a single that broke her internationally. She had several albums before that. She was a child entertainer and a teenage pop star in Canada. And we think of our first impression of Alanis Morissette here in the States is Ought to Know and Jagged Little Pill, that album. But in fact, it took 10 years for that automatic success. And I don't know if it was exactly 10 years, you know what I mean? I'm using an example, but like it took many years for that overnight success, for that overnight superstardom to occur. And the circumstances had to be right for something like that single Ought to Know to catch fire. And that is the truth behind a big change. Nothing happens in a vacuum, right? There are things that we do feel blindsided by, and we can feel blindsided by success, and we can feel blindsided by, chaotic change that we don't like. But in truth, the circumstances were there to allow for things to come to a head. And that may or may not give us much comfort because we can't control every little thing, but it should let us know, well, we can control the direction of whether we're living towards the change we want or living towards the change we don't want. In cases like climate change, am I living towards the change I want? Not just by doing things like recycling and trying to be mindful about waste and choosing not to use AI, which uses an enormous amount of water and is contributing dramatically to climate change. Not just by making those personal choices, but also by voting for the change and voting for the people who, in positions of power much greater than mine, will regulate things so that climate change happens slower. Because the truth is, me choosing to recycle or not recycle a cup that I bought from Starbucks is going to have much less of an impact than whether a law allows a corporation to dump its nuclear waste in a lake or not, right? That one move is going to have bigger things, so a bigger impact. And so me as a human being, the only way I can live in integrity with that is to understand that, yes, there are small things I can do, but that's not all I can do. I can vote in for the bigger things. I can be an activist, not just amongst my fellow human beings, but in terms of my relationship to power, right? And how I choose to interpret that relationship and how I choose to work with it, right? We can try to create the circumstances for the change we want. In this case, I'm talking about creating the circumstances to not have more terrible climate change, or at least reduce that impact. We can also try to create the circumstances to have good things happen to us. If we want to be an overnight success, quote unquote, right? If we want to have an Ought to Know hit single, we can do the things behind the scenes in our careers and not behind the scenes, where we put ourselves out there again and again in smaller ways and learn how to climb the ladder and how to get different opportunities and continue. We can put in the effort to make the things that are not the gigantic thing we want, but will set up circumstances so that perhaps we'll be in the right place at the right time. And a smaller example of this is I was in a multi-artist show as a musician a couple of years ago at the Long Island Hall of Fame, Long Island Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame. And I woke up one day to a bunch of people texting me you're on News 12 right now. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm at home. Just woke up. And what it was that because of this artist show, which someone had, I guess, sent a press release somewhere, News 12 went looking for footage to share about it. And what they found was footage of me performing that I had posted, because I make a point of posting my live performances regularly. I make a point of having a lot of content that is ready to go. And so they like found my content and posted it. And because I had like a press kit and it was easy to find different things, and I was, one of the artists who had done that, who had those circumstances to make it easy for someone from News 12 to be like, here's a video we can put on. It looks high quality and it's a good representation of the show. I was the one who happened to be on News 12. Was I more worthy than anyone? No, it so happened I had nurtured the circumstances to appear on News 12 that day without knowing I was doing it, but knowing that I was creating opportunities for myself to be seen, right? So we can nurture the circumstances for the big change we want. We do have actual control over some of the big out of control change by nurturing the circumstances. Do we have complete control? No, we don't. We have to surrender to that truth. We have to think of ourselves as a soldier in the fight rather than like the king playing chess with the pawns. We're just doing our best. We're just doing our best to strategize and show up little by little for what we want. Hydration checkpoint. Now, the other types of change are the types that we want to happen. Positive and negative. I'll give 2 examples of positive and negative endings. Graduation, positive. Divorce, negative on the surface, although as someone in the middle of a divorce that I want to have on purpose, I view that as positive, but I think most people think of divorce and it feels like an ending, not a beginning, because it is. It's, it's the end of a marriage. It's the end of a commitment to somebody. And, it's not necessarily a happy ending, right? Whereas we think of graduation, wow, I just got a diploma for all my hard work, as being a happy ending, right? And when I say happy ending, it's like an end to that story. Because here's the other thing. I'm going back to the tarot. A lot of people talk about the death card as representing change. It does. It represents an ending. It's important to me to make this distinction because people say death means new beginnings, and with respect, you're wrong. New beginnings do come after endings. Endings can take a long time to complete and are not the same as a new beginning, right? My divorce, for lack of a handier example, is the end of my marriage. It's not a new beginning. I do get a new beginning afterwards, right? I get to go forward in my life as a single person and make new choices and make changes. But specifically, the divorce is the end of the marriage. It's not the new beginning, right? Now, with it can come a new beginning, but the death card represents the endings. We're talking about the ending when the death card comes up. When we talk about new beginnings, we have different cards. We have Fool. The Fool is a new beginning card. That is your fresh start card. Not uncommon to see those 2 cards side by side in a reading. And for smaller beginnings and endings, we have the Aces, the beginning of each suit, and the 10s, the end of each suit, right? So we also talk about endings and beginnings through the beginnings and endings of each suit of the tarot. Now, it's important to me to be like, I like to disambiguate the death card. I like to be a little bit like spicy about that, because I think there's a small toxic positivity thing that happens around that card where people they're not comfortable with endings. They're not comfortable with that kind of dramatic, you can't go back change. That an ending, such as a divorce or a death or a graduation, and yes, the death card can represent death. No, it doesn't always, or even a majority of the time, but yeah, it can, right? It's in there. That is the tarot's lexicon, to communicate these things. People are uncomfortable enough with endings that they want to do this toxic bypassing thing and say, oh, no, it represents change. It represents new beginnings. No, it doesn't. It represents an ending. Now, with endings do come change and do come new beginnings, right? And when someone is going through a difficult ending, yes, it is loving to also remind them that they get a new beginning, right? When someone has a death in their family, I don't think it is loving to be like, wow, now you get to live without this person. You get to have a new beginning, right? Like, some people need to allow themselves to nurture the ending in certain circumstances. Now, if you have an ending that you're rooting for, a graduation, for example, a breakup where you're leaving behind something toxic, right? Those are good endings. Those are endings that you want to see happen. And then, yeah, it's really good to remind people like, hey, you get the new beginning. You get the diploma at the end of graduation. You get the fresh start when you leave behind whatever, I don't know, this toxic job or toxic breakup you might be choosing to find an ending with, right? It's loving to remind ourselves that we get new beginnings. But it is not loving to pretend that an ending isn't an ending, right? And that's true with death, but it's true with everything. Like graduation also means the end of an era, right? When we graduate from any school, we're ending a lot of things. We're concluding in a joyful way, an exuberant way, our studies, and we're getting something, kind of concrete to show for it. And also, we're ending all the nights we spent with our best friends, staying up late and studying and, also sharing ridiculous memes or whatever to get ourselves through. We're ending perhaps social things that occurred during that time period. We're also ending a period of predictability and entering into a question mark, which can be scary, right? Endings have a unique psychological thing. We're realizing, wow, my life must go on without this. Now, some of that is good and we work for it, but it's always bittersweet to some extent, right? It's always like, there's always things that go along with the ending. There's always loss. It is the end of an era, and there are things with that era that can't come with you. I describe death in the tarot card as walking through a portal. And once you go through the portal, the door closes behind you. You can't go back through. Certainly that is true with literal death. It's true with endings, such as concrete endings of like moving out, or, the end of quitting your job, the end of a relationship, and indeed graduation. You can't go back. You can't go back after you graduate. Maybe you can continue your education and go to a different place of learning or pursue a different degree, but you can't go back, right? And even if it's something you've worked hard for, you are grieving the change. And that's something that we need to learn about to take care of ourselves during change, is to allow ourselves to grieve the change even though there's good stuff that we want. And it's toxic bypassing to pretend that we don't have to do that. And that, thank you for coming to my TED Talk, is why I don't think it's healthy for people to say death represents new beginnings. No, it doesn't. It represents endings. There may be new beginnings to follow. There typically are. However, when we are too cowardly to acknowledge that an ending is happening, we're not helping the person across the table. Our job as a tarot reader is to help them through this journey of their lives. It is not to pretend that their journey is something other than it is. When there is an ending, it's more loving to say, you are experiencing an ending, and talk about how that person can nurture themselves through that. And yeah, part of that might be embracing the new beginning. But when someone is having an ending, we don't say, oh, but now you get a fresh start. That's not necessarily loving. There are contexts where it is loving to remind them of the fresh start, and there are contexts where that's very painful. When death does represent death, we don't want to talk about the new beginning that they're getting over losing a loved one that they're grieving, right? That's not comforting in that particular moment, right? What's more helpful is allowing them to have their process, right? Rather than rushing them through it, right? I don't think we do ourselves a service when we pretend that endings aren't endings. Endings and beginnings, however, are not separate. Usually what happens when we're going through a period of change, and I tell this all the time to people I'm reading for, is we have a fade in, fade out situation, such as a DJ might do at a show, fading out one song, fading up another, right? And the ending is the fade out. It's very rare that something ends overnight. And again, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success, right? There are times when you walk out the door when you say, I'm never coming back, right? And usually you planned that, right? When you quit your job, very rare that it's spur of the moment. Yes, it does happen. But even in that case, there's circumstances, right? If things are so bad at your job that you're like, I'm walking out right now, you knew it might happen at some point. You might have already been looking for a job. You might have been resisting the change, but you knew things were getting bad, right? So sometimes, yes, we do have those dramatic endings, but circumstances like made it at least a tiny bit predictable, right? And that's the fade. it's a fast fade in that situation, right? Like things are getting worse, things are getting worse, things are getting worse. You know what? I'm done. Close the door, fast fade, hard cut, right? And similarly with beginnings, we get a fade in with new beginnings. And sometimes it's a fast fade, right? And sometimes it's a slow fade. And sometimes it tricks you. I just moved into a new place. And so you could argue like, well, it's a dramatic new beginning. And it was dramatic for me emotionally to wake up in a different place, to wake up in a different living situation, one that was better for me, one that was healthier emotionally for me. It was dramatic to wake up in a new bed and be in a new place and live in a new zip code and have a different commute to my gigs and stuff like that. And at the same time, a lot of things stayed the same. I still had the same gigs, not the exact same ones because, I have different gigs every week, but, the same gigs that I always perform as a musician. I still have the same stuff, only now it's in boxes and I can't find half of it. And there are things that were kind of waiting on my move for that new beginning that I'm still waiting on because now I have to unpack, and unpacking is part of the new beginning, right? Like just moving in and having everything around me in the way that I like to have it is how I'd like that new beginning to be complete, so to speak. But guess what? It turns out someone has to unpack these boxes, and that's taking time because I took a few days off, couldn't afford to take more than that, and I still have to go do my gigs, and it's still the busy season. So, it's a slow fade on the new beginning, right? And most often, those things happen simultaneously. You're getting a fade out and you're getting a fade in. It's very rare that you get a new beginning without an ending, and it's very rare that it's clean and not messy. And I think much of people's resistance to change when they want the change is wanting it to be clean. I just want this over. I just want this over. I certainly am this person. I have written songs about that. Or I just want this started. I just want this started, right? And the truth is, it's always a slow fade when you're walking it. It's a little like how if a lot of my friends have kids, if I haven't seen the kid of one of my friends in a couple years, I will, I'll go over and visit and see the kid, and I'll be like, wow, like the last time I saw you, you were like this much shorter and you had a much smaller vocabulary, and you were, like now you're like talking about all these interesting things and you're doing all these things you couldn't do before. And it's like the growth is like amazing. Now, of course, that didn't happen overnight. And for the parent of that kid, they, yes, notice the progress, but they notice it correctly as slow progress, right? They notice it as those slow day-to-day changes, nurturing the circumstances for growth. Most beginnings and endings, even the dramatic ones, require some nurturing. And so I want to talk about how we can nurture beginnings and endings in this episode. And how we can nurture ourselves through them. Nurturing ourselves through them, through any change, is really, it's about the basics of self-care. And we owe it to ourselves to learn what our basics are for our self-care, what our ground is, what gets us to a place of like, yep, stability. We owe it to ourselves to learn those basics so that at times of great change and turmoil, whether it's desired change or change we didn't want, we can go back to those basics, because those basics will be the same for us every time. And having that toolbox, and it will grow over time too, right? Some basics for me are getting enough sleep. That's something I have not been willing to compromise on since I was about 25 years old. And it's because I experimented with getting 8 hours of sleep a night, which is something I had never done in my life before. I experimented with it for a week. I'm like, I'm just going to do this for a week and see if it changes my life. And it did. I was like, whoa, a lot of stress symptoms disappeared. A lot of things that I thought were normal that were challenging throughout the day disappeared and got easier because I was getting more sleep. And now, 15 years later, I'm really I'm the sleep police. I'm really about getting enough sleep. And I try not to be like a sleep bully to other people because they make their choices, I make mine. But I know for me, I make it a big priority in my life to get enough sleep. Does that mean every single night I get more than 8 hours of sleep? No, I can't control every single circumstance. But it does mean I make an effort and I think about it. I nurture that circumstance, right? That's like a baseline stability thing for me. Over the years since then, which that also happens to be the time in my life I was learning how to be a friend to myself, I found other items in my toolbox that are about my self-care, right? Journaling has been one that has been with me since childhood. Journaling, write your way out, writing my way through always helps me get clarity and understand what it is that I need to do. For me, not for everybody, right? Walking has been a big one. Walking and movement and changes of scenery. And all of that is kind of like, I think, part of something bigger, where the combination of like movement and seeing different things and not the same things, and also like being physically doing something but not having my mind have a task to do in that moment, it really helps me. And walking is kind of the, what's the word? Like the joining together of all of those things. But it wouldn't have to be walking. You know what I mean? There's a few other things I could do instead of walking that would give me that outcome. But having those tools, getting enough sleep, journaling, walking, having that like trifecta of like, okay, if my life's on fire, I know the 3 things that are going to become a priority in every single day. And if my life is so on fire that I have no extra time, I'm still going to make the time. I'm still going to make the time to get as much sleep as I can. I still am going to make the time to journal. I still am going to make the time to walk. Am I perfect at it? Hell no. Do I know it works? Hell yes. So I will keep trying, right? I will keep trying to show up for those things, because I know that when I do, I make better choices and I'm better able to handle what life throws. So get to know your self-care toolbox, get to know your big self-care stuff, and make a practice of nurturing yourself generally with them, but make a practice of like, that's also the emergency kit, right? It's one thing, like those practices are both your self-care that hopefully helps you grow and, generally, have the slow growth you want in life. But they're also the, an emergency break glass repair kit, right? They're also the fire extinguisher. And understanding that is pretty meaningful. Understanding that when my life is on fire, it still makes, like, even though my first impulse is going to be like, no, I don't have time to journal about my feelings right now. My life is on fire. Incorrect. Journaling about my feelings, the first moment that I have to do so, will make me better able to handle the fire, and I'll get through it more quickly and with less stress. And that's been a hard one to learn. But it is true. The same things that are good for you day by day are also in emergency break glass things. They're also the things to turn to make immediate time for, even though it feels counterintuitive. How do we nurture endings? We don't have control, right? That's what I want to talk about in these nurturing of beginnings and endings. We don't have control of either thing. If what we want is the new beginning, perhaps we want a new relationship. Perhaps we want to meet and fall in love with someone. Well, wild news. We have control over some of our actions. We can decide to put ourselves out there and make new friends. We could perhaps make a profile on a dating site, or we could just put ourselves in circumstances where we pursue our joys and our hobbies in ways that also introduce us to new people, right? We could do a lot of things that may help, but none of those things is a guarantee that you will meet the love of your life and fall in deep love with them, right? And similarly, if we want to have financial security, there's a lot of things we can do that will help, right? We can pursue a career that we believe will be stable, although at any moment things could change, right? We could, save our money to the best of our ability. We could look at our income and expenses. There's a lot of things that may help, but all of those things are still true. And also there's still poverty in the world. There are still circumstances, both political and, acts of God, for lack of a better word, that create refugees out of people that, their whole life, is suddenly gone. And this isn't me trying to catastrophize and make you afraid and make you feel like there's no point in doing the things that will give you a shot at a good life. Do them. You know what I mean? Do them, because those habits will serve you. Even if the rug does get pulled out from under you, you'll still know how to do those habits, and you'll have that untake-backable knowledge of how to work with yourself and how to work with whatever resources you do have. Do them, right? But being aware, we can nurture a new beginning or a new ending or a reality that we want, but we can't fully control it, even when it's just ours, right? Even if the outcome is just ours, say it's our body. Like, I want to be able to lift this many pounds. I want to be able to run this kind of marathon. We can nurture. We can make choices about how we take care of our body and what we expose our body to, right? If we want to do something intense like a marathon, we recognize that there are things that are great for us that we're doing, such as getting regular exercise, and things that maybe are not great for us. Maybe we're sacrificing sleep to train at some times, right? I just read a book about very high level Olympic athletes and how some of the things are healthy, but you shouldn't make the assumption that everything about their life is about health, because sometimes they're actually doing things that sacrifice their overall wellness in favor of their goal. And that's not a bad thing, right? It's like, it's just reality. And we make choices towards the beginning or the ending that we desire. Maybe the ending is a gold medal, right? Maybe the ending is I don't know, is something like graduation, and the beginnings that we desire, right? Maybe the beginning we desire is a new love or a fresh start, away from this problem. It's funny how endings and beginnings get muddy, right? When we want something to end, often we do want the beginning on the other side of it, right? When we want a toxic job to end, we're really rooting for the freedom we will have after that, right? But we can't even maybe visualize it yet because we're so caught up in just needing it to be over. And that is a way, conversely, to nurture an ending, is to focus on the beginning. Is to say, okay, I want this ending. Why do I want this ending? Why do I want to get away from this toxic person, to get away from this toxic relationship, to complete my schooling, to get out of debt? All of those are endings, right? Why do I want this? I want what's on the other side of it. And if we give ourselves an opportunity to focus on the other side and focus on like, what is that new beginning? We're going to give ourselves the motivation to keep going. And also sometimes we'll see shortcuts, right? If it's like, well, I want to get out of debt, for example, because I want to be a homeowner, or I want to move and I need to have the money to be able to do so, or I want to be able to invest in my career. We may, if we focus on the new beginning, that's what I want, right? That's the goal. The dream is that new beginning that's on the other side of my debt. We may find ways to start on that new beginning even as we're working on the ending. And then we're superpowering it, right? We're working on getting out of debt, but maybe we find out, oh, with a little bit of sweat equity, I can start this project. It's maybe not as good as if I could throw more money at it or if I had better credit, but I can start it. I can do a workaround, right? And then we feel great doing both. We're like, okay, I'm working towards it no matter what, and I'm working towards an ending that will make this new beginning easier for myself, right? It's good for morale, and it's good for moving the plot forward, because that's what we want. We want to move the plot forward. And isn't it funny that I think all of us collectively in life want to move the plot forward. And we all hate change, and even good change, right? Even good change is stressful. And it's baked into our human experience, because when things are not predictable, they're frightening. When we know the world around us, like if we, when we're like, I don't know, proto-humans living in the woods, right? And there's like lions that can eat us and other types of things. When we know where the lion sleeps in relation to where we are, and the lion sleeps in the same place every night, no problem. We just stay far away from that lion when it's sleeping, and we know when it gets up so that we can be more careful, right? And if suddenly, I don't know, if change happens, we have to move to a different place that's closer to the lion or even further away from the lion, but we don't know. Is there another lion? Is there a jaguar? When change happens, we can't rest as easy. When we know the lion is sleeping over there about 2 miles south of me, it's not gonna wake me up in the middle of the night, because I know when it sleeps. I'm good. I know when and where it is. I'm good from that danger. Then something happens and change happens, and even if it's a good change, now you're like, well, now I don't know where the lion is. Can I really sleep if I don't know where the lion is in relation to me, right? It's evolutionary. We are hardwired to not like change, but we must have it, we must have it to grow and to move the plot forward, we do have to find that balance between protecting ourselves from real things, including mental health things, protecting ourselves from mental health consequences by not living constantly outside our comfort zone. That helps nobody. And also nurturing change by expanding our comfort zone enough to let ourselves expand the edges of our world and not grow stagnant, right? And that's the dance. And the tarot card I want to talk about in relation to that is Temperance, which comes after the Death card. After the Death card, tarot readers of the world, does not come rebirth or a new beginning. After the Death card comes Temperance. And you can think about this in the Fool's Journey. Temperance really is about finding that balance. And after the Death card, what happens with Temperance is Temperance says, oh, it's not as dramatic as you thought. It's not as earth-shattering as you thought, good or bad, right? You move somewhere, you start a new job, you get a new beginning. Oh, it's not as dramatic as I thought, because it turns out I'm still the same person with the same triggers and the same silly habits and the same whatever. It's not as dramatic as I thought. I'm still me, right? You get an ending, you lose a loved one, or you lose a job, or something crazy happens, whether it's good or bad, whether it's graduation and you're happy about it, or whether it's getting fired and you're mad about it. And Temperance comes in over the time after that and shows you, oh, it's not as dramatic as you thought. Like, life still goes on, in other words. And Temperance is the life still goes on card. It's life after death. Who are you now in this new life? And we come to a place of nurturing ourselves. And you'll notice that Temperance coming after death is really in line with that idea of, in times of dramatic change, I must return to my self-care center. I must return to those constants, which for me are like getting enough sleep and journaling and walking, and my creative practice is one. That toolbox grows as you go. But part of achieving life after death is finding those constants. Okay, something big changed. It was dramatic. It's chaotic. I feel like I'm about to tear my hair out. What do? We come home to our self-care. I remember being very moved many, many years ago in one of the first yoga classes I took, where someone said the words to me, come home to your breath. I can't remember if it was active yoga or if there was just meditation, but come home to your breath was the recommendation. It stuck with me for decades, because breath is a constant, and breath is constantly changing, right? The nature of breath is that you're constantly changing. You're breathing in, you're breathing out, and that cycle must continue unless you don't want to be alive anymore. But it is a constant. And when you come home to it, you can find a home in those constants. If you just moved, if you just lost a job, lost a house, lost a loved one, you can still find those constants that you still have. And that's how you can find your stability as a human who's hardwired to hate change, right? Even if it's a good change, you come home to your constants. I want to bring us to Which You Got This, which is the part of it's a part of the podcast where I try to give you something really tangible and actionable that you can do like right now, today, around this topic. And what I want to give you is a phase in, phase out ritual. And I originally was going to prescribe this as like a moon cycle ritual. I've decided I'm going to do that for the bonus episode for my patrons. My $5 and up patrons get a bonus episode. I'm going to give you a full moon cycle ritual you can do about phasing out the old and phasing in the new, to nurture the endings and beginnings that you want in your life to move the plot forward. But I wanted this one to be quick and easy, because that's like the spirit of this part of the podcast, is I give you something you can do today. No waiting, right? So try this. Give yourself a ritual. It doesn't matter what the moon is doing. It doesn't matter what Mercury is doing. This is a ritual you can do anytime, anywhere. What you need is some paper, a way to destroy the paper, and a place to keep the paper. Those are the things you need. And you need your brain and your heart. And I guess you need a pen or pencil, something to write with. Here's the phase in, phase out ritual. We are going to nurture the endings we want. What do I want to see remove itself from my life? The endings that we want. Maybe we want an end to, political upheaval. If you're also tuned in from America right now, maybe we want an end to living in interesting times. Maybe we want an end to an unstable situation that is making you tear your hair out. Maybe you want an end to a horrible job. Maybe you want an end to an interaction with someone that is making you feel crazy. Maybe you want an end to a certain type of work or a certain, like project you're committed to that needs to be over because it's overwhelming. What is it that you want to end? Maybe you want an end to your self-esteem struggles, right? We got 2 pieces of paper and we're writing phase out. We are phasing these things out. We understand that as we're writing these, that it's not one and done. It would be nice if we could like wake up the next morning and they have disappeared from our life. But we know the reality is we have to phase them out, right? Just like a bad habit, right? You can quit smoking, for example, cold turkey, but it's still a phase out because the urge to have another cigarette will fade out. It will not disappear the first day. That's why cold turkey is so hard, right? And there are people, I was just talking to someone who quit smoking, and she's done it both ways at different times in her life, where she has gone cold turkey and just been like, nope, I'm done. And she's done it in the other way where you like give yourself something to do instead of smoking so that it's like an easier fade out for you. And it's like either's fine because the end game is quitting smoking, right? Like you're winning either way. You just choose what's right for you. But either way, you're fading out. If you're cold turkey, you're fading out by dealing with like that, okay, but I want to have a cigarette. Okay, but want to have a cigarette. Okay, but I want to have a cigarette. And it fades out as you do the work. As you show up for that very hard saying of like self-denial, it gets lower and lower. It's like, okay, but I want to have a cigarette. Okay, but I want to have a cigarette. It fades out, right? I'm a non-smoker. I've never smoked, but I don't know. I had this conversation with someone who quit smoking. I know it's a common experience. What are we phasing out in our lives? We're going to write it down. We don't have to worry about the to-do for ourselves right now. We set the intention. I am phasing this out of my life. Some of that we will have control over. Some of it we won't. We might have control over deciding never to have another cigarette again, but we might not have control over something wildly stressful happening 24 hours hence that makes us decide, how committed am I to not having a cigarette because, wow, I'm losing my mind today, for example. And we might, have control over deciding that we want to leave this job, but we might not have control over when we find a new one, right? So we have some control, but not full control. We just make the commitment. I'm phasing this out. I'm co-creating with the universe. I'm asking for help. It's like the serenity prayer. I'm accepting what I cannot change, but I am finding the courage to change what I can. And I'm hoping that's not in the serenity prayer. That's just, I think, a helpful ingredient. I'm hoping that the universe or my higher power or whatever helps me out with the rest. What are we phasing out? We write it down. We then have a new paper for our new beginning. What are we phasing in? What new beginning do we want to phase into our life? And I like thinking of it as phasing out and phasing in because first of all, it's real. That is really how it happens. And secondly, it helps us see the smaller changes, right? It helps us see like a parent raising a kid, like, wait, that's the first time you ever used that word in a sentence. Oh, that's the first time that you didn't just walk across the room and stumble to a piece of furniture, but you kept walking and didn't look for something to lean on, right? Like those small wins that are a piece of learning to walk, learning to speak, whatever. When we commit to phasing in, we have an opportunity to see and celebrate those smaller milestones along the way. And when we commit to phasing out, same thing. Okay, maybe I didn't quit my job yet, but I've made some progress, right? Write down what you're phasing in. And again, we accept that we don't have full control, right? Maybe I'm phasing in new love. Maybe I'm phasing in a new job opportunity. Maybe I'm phasing in a move to a new city, right? I don't have full control over my ability to do that, but I can definitely do some things that'll help it along, right? And we're making a commitment that we're doing our best and hoping, that the grace of the universe will move us through. We're committing to phase it in. We're believing in ourselves enough to take the leap. What is it that you want to phase in? Now, here's what you're going to do with these 2 papers. You're going to read the phase out list. I recommend feeling your feelings about it because if you're phasing things out, you're mad, you're sad, there's a reason you don't want them in your life, right? I recommend feeling your feelings. I recommend even reading it through the lens of a couple feelings, like reading the list and being like, read it mad, then read it with the grief, that you feel around how these things have affected you. Then read it, I don't know, some other way. Read it funny, like you're telling a joke to a friend. Read it a couple ways to really get in your head like, yeah, I'm done with this shit. And then be done. Rip up that piece of paper, burn it, throw it away, flush it down the toilet, as long as that's safe for you. As all of those things, like if you're going to burn it, do it in a safe way. Practice fire safety. If you're going to flush it, make sure that it's not going to clog up your septic tank, you know. Do whatever, or let the wind carry it away, whatever, you know. Destroy it, in other words. As above, so below. You're giving the below. You're like, I'm here and I'm saying I'm phasing these things out, and I am doing this thing that symbolizes them being gone. Like, universe and higher self, take the wheel, right? And with the phase in, we will read this. I again recommend you feeling your feelings. Feel how much you want it. Feel how good it will feel to have it, right? Read it happy. Read it with like the angry grief of, I can't believe I don't have this already, right? Read it a few different ways. And like, just so you can feel all your different feelings around it, right? Because I think the feeling is important. That's an important part of ritual. Write it down, give it a few reads, and then we fold it up, fold it towards yourself. That's like a traditional thing in folk magic, is if you fold paper, you're folding it away from yourself for stuff you don't want. You're folding it towards yourself for stuff you do want. Fold it towards yourself and keep it somewhere where it will be close to you. Again, we are doing the below in as above, so below. We're saying, I want this thing close to me, so I'm keeping it close to me. I want this in my life, right? I want a new job in my life. So maybe if you want a new job, maybe you're putting it in your wallet, like you will put the money that you get from your paycheck in your wallet, and you carry that wallet with you every day. Maybe if you're looking for new love, maybe you put it under your pillow, like, you know, where you will hopefully lay your head next to your future love of your life, whatever, right? Put it somewhere close to you. Maybe you carry the same bag around every day and you put it in that bag, you know, put it somewhere that it will ride along with you through life. Again, as above, so below. You're doing the below. You're saying, here I am on the ground. This is what I want. I'm doing this symbolic thing that brings me what I want. Universe, subconscious, higher self, take the wheel, make this so, make it reality, right? Try this at home. Try the phase in, phase out ritual. Let me know how you feel about it. I'm going to try this, I think, with the Moon Magic and Meditation Club. Spoiler alert, if you're in the Monday Club, I think we're going to do this sometime. Anyway, thanks for tuning in to SassafrasCast. This brings us to the end of our show. There's going to be a bonus recording about how to use a full moon cycle to nurture the beginnings and endings you want in your life. I want to thank you for spending, if you're a bonus patron, you will be getting that episode. If you want to sign up, you can at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot. If you want to financially support this podcast, bonus patrons start at $5. But if you just want to support and get access to like some cool perks and a cool community, $1 a month or more will get you there. There's stuff like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, and more that you will get access to. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, you can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com. I actually love doing episodes based on people's questions and suggestions. My most popular episode ever was What the Bleep Do I Do with Crystals? And it was based on a suggestion from a friend of mine who was like, I just want someone to tell me what to do with crystals. And I was like, cool. And I was so glad I made that episode. So if you have a suggestion or request, whatever, hit me up, sassafrastarot@gmail.com, or on social media at Sassafras Tarot, SassafrasTarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. If you would like to order a reading, go to my Linktree. Linktree is linktr.ee/Sassafras Tarot, because I do have an Etsy shop where you can order a bunch of different readings from me. I also offer my monthly tarot reports now, which I just have a different place where you can sign up for those, so you can get either through my Linktree. That's linktr.ee/Sassafras Tarot. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. May the plot move forward in your life, and may you have the self-care and the serenity to be comfortable with that change. Talk to you soon.